Hello there. I'm warning you, this topic may make you sad. Truth is, I've been debating to make this video because I didn't want to make noise or make people sad. But this needed to be done. Thousands of sewing patterns were thrown in the garbage during the last month of JOanns closing. All the unsold sewing patterns were ordered to be destroyed by the higher-ups and went to the dumpster. This is different from throwing the sewing patterns to the recycle bins or donating them. Let's backtrack a little. It's been an open secret that some companies destroy their own products. I will spill the beans on the reasons why JOanns did it. Was it really JOanns that ordered them destroyed? Okay, JOanns had nothing to do with the destruction. They had no say about it anymore. They'd been bought by a liquidator company. So, was it the liquidator then? Or was it the pattern company? First, let's put it all in context. To clarify once and for all, fact was, all the envelope sewing patterns sold at JOanns was not owned by JOanns. Sewing patterns were not a product of JOanns. It's under a consignment agreement. The sewing patterns and the magazines also were all consignment products. For example, in the case of the magazines, there was a company that distributed them, called Ingram. Ingram supplied magazines and select books. You can call them a distributor or a wholesaler for all things related to publications. The sewing patterns, however, had the same thing going. I don't know the name of the company, sorry, but there was a middleman or merchant service of all things related to sewing patterns sold at JOanns. And it makes sense as these merchants can really customize the needs of their clients. If you've seen, the JOanns employees had these handheld scanners. The portable computer had many internal apps, including inventory of JOanns products. Except, note this, the magazines and the sewing patterns. The magazines and sewing patterns was never in the system. It's not trackable like any other products at JOanns, like scissors and fabrics, etc. So, if you have experience asking an employee to reorder a pattern or even track a missing pattern, it was difficult to do it because there was no data among stores. To track a pattern, you may have to make a phone call or have someone look for it or visit the store yourself and look for that pattern. Sewing patterns sold at JOanns were not technically JOanns products. It's consignment. As you know, any consignment agreement, presumably there's a split profit going on also. Let's just say 60-40. Just an example. If it happens to be as low as $1.99, then the profit sharing is much lower also. But remember, the distributor had to make money too to pay their supplier, which was the pattern company. But who sets the prices of sewing patterns? The answer was the sewing pattern company, but the vendor also had the power to offer deep discounts to their consignment partners. In this case, JOanns. For example, oversupply or undersold patterns. There were three entities here: JOanns, the vendor, distributor, and pattern company. All worked together to set certain sales and markdowns. In other words, it was a codependent relationship. I may use the word interchangeably here: pattern vendor, merchant, purveyor, distributor, middleman, or perhaps a wholesaler. I am not sure about the details on how they work with the company that owned the patterns. That I do not claim to know. The confusion was customers assumed JOanns owned the patterns. No, not their product. Maybe long time ago, but not in at least 10 years. How did they make it all work? In a nutshell, I will explain how they did it. JOanns used a point-of-sale software, the cash register at the checkout. The vendor had access to the sales of sewing patterns at JOanns, sales, returns, and new inventories. But note, this was all automated. It's remote tracking. It's the computers doing it, people. This is a shocker to everyone. The vendor replenished the sold patterns based from the data they access from JOanns. Tech tends to call this real-time data. JOanns had no control what's to come or coming. It's not their business. In contrary to popular beliefs, JOanns did not order or could not order any patterns. It was not stocked in the warehouse. It used to be decades ago, all different brands came from different sources. It was too much to track. These days, the middle merchants have made it smoother to sell sewing patterns in between pattern publishers and retailers like JOanns. Many people complain about unannounced pattern sales. Well, sometimes it was done at the last minute, long after they printed out the JOanns flyers. JOanns couldn't command what price to set anytime they wanted to. It's not their product. Many people got this confused and angry about its sporadic sales and unannounced deals. So to clarify that part, sewing patterns were not owned by JOanns. Periodically, the pattern company ordered JOanns to discard old discontinued patterns. But the tricky part was the word discard to some employees was a broad term, which means it could be donated, recycled, or thrown in the garbage for others to take. Lots of gray area there. But what was different about the order to destroy the patterns in May of 2025 was the suggestion to purposely damage the sewing patterns and throw them in the dump. Soak with water, lots of water. Anything to make the patterns unusable. Forever. Ask any JOann employees or go to online forums about this topic. To repeat again, imagine 700 plus stores of JOanns closing in the same month. Hundreds of thousands of brand new patterns were ordered destroyed. Not donated, not thrown in the recycle bins, not priced at 25 cents each, but destroyed. With rumors it to be thrown out a day or so before the garbage pickup, so it won't sit on the garbage for long. This was to discourage theft and dumpster diving and the entrepreneurial people who dumpster dive and resell in the market. This sounds so wrong because it is. I'm not sure if all of JOann employees followed all the instructions. Perhaps a few rebelled, and who's to know they were actually donated or in recycle bins, ready for others to take. No one knows for sure, but a majority of the patterns were truly destroyed. So the nagging question is why? They could have priced it as low as 25 cents. It'll be a happy day for everybody, but that's not to be. Okay, JOanns did not have full control of how to price their sewing patterns because it's not their product. So did the liquidator who bought JOanns did it? To prove to you how the liquidator couldn't care less if it's up to them, I bought a Ditto sewing projection kit that was priced 2 years ago for $799. When they announced the liquidation, the Ditto was marked down to $199. But it still didn't sell. I happened to buy it at the last day and paid only $5.97 before tax. Liquidator was willing to price it all dirt cheap on the last minute. But it's really the pattern company who couldn't and wouldn't do it. They would rather destroy their own product. So in other words, there was a pricing standoff on how much can you milk the cow by profiting at the last minute, but yet knowing they will throw it away anyway. So if the pattern company knew about the pending last days of JOanns, couldn't they just take their loss and sell the patterns at dirt cheap prices? Let's break it down. Let's go back to the 60-40 profit sharing. Had they lowered it to $1, they still need to split the profit, right? Now we're talking sales in cents. That's not worth the payroll for the liquidator, who at that time technically was in charge of employee salaries. Besides, it would have been pandemonium buying to hoard sewing patterns. It would have been disastrous for the store to sell the patterns that cheap. If this is making your mind blank, me too. If it's up to the liquidator, they would have sold this for perhaps 10 cents for all they care. But it's the pattern company who dictated the price. So let's break it down why. Why? I'm going to explain this to you by taking the side of the pattern vendor and the publisher. Number 1, creating scarcity. By limiting availability, the company can command a higher price for sewing patterns to benefit them and their other retailers. But especially on Amazon, the Simplicity brand has a store at Amazon as well as competing with the Amazon warehouse inventory itself. It's complicated. Number 2, lack of infrastructure or outlets as to where unwanted patterns should be sold in its second life. It could well be a logistical issue. No warehouse to put it. Where is it going to go? Number 3, retailed sewing patterns were considered all store displays, which means they have been dinged up or mishandled, and some may have aesthetic damage or even parts of the pattern were stolen. Oh yeah, that happens. To avoid potential problems of customer complaints, it's just better to throw them all in the dumpster. It takes manpower to inspect each of these patterns, and guess what? It's the quality of tissue paper too. It's hard to refold the pattern papers to its original state. Next reason is tax deduction. Tax write-offs are financially beneficial than donation incentives. So companies could declare a loss, destroy their own product to make more money later. It's mind-numbing. Next, for consignment sewing pattern, while there was a manpower budget to display new and existing patterns, the outgoing discontinued patterns did not benefit the retailer like JOanns. It would cost payroll hours to sort, repackage, and distribute to different charities. So instead of donating, dumping them in the garbage was still more economical. In the older days, discarded patterns were marked with a D. You may have seen the letter D, which means discard or discontinued. And the retailers back then had the manpower to mark them before donating. But with the volume of patterns that JOanns had in all their stores, they could not afford to mark them all. When JOanns announced their closings, liquidators was there to cash in all JOanns product and not the consignment products. So the liquidator would not benefit from marking each of these patterns with a D. Next reason is donations, had they donated it, will likely saturate the market and will slow down or dampen the sales of brand new patterns still being sold by other retailers and online retailers. Pattern vendor and the pattern company both protected their existing customers here, and based from this argument, it makes sense to throw in the garbage. Control and distribution. Companies don't want patterns appearing in unexpected places, losing control over their brand image. Heaven forbid someone selling dumpster dive sewing patterns sold as brand new online. Or let's just say Goodwill gets all the donated sewing patterns. It's crazy to think the pricing war that could happen here. It cannot be done. So throw it in the dump. Return to sender problem. Why not return all these sewing patterns to the company? Listen, it's just less headache and cheaper to throw it in the garbage. Think about the 700 JOanns store that had thousands of patterns that cost to ship via FedEx or USPS. It's not worth it. Plus, once received, they may not have the manpower or capacity to verify the completeness of each and every pattern. Imagine eBay or Etsy sellers profiting from these patterns. Widespread donation to charitable places can cause dilution in brand and reputation or image of the company. The decision to destroy pattern company hope to benefit financially in the long term instead of short term. Now, who decided this disastrous destruction of perfectly usable sewing patterns? I'm speculating here. Perhaps it was a mutual agreement by the liquidator, the vendor, and the pattern company. I don't know exactly. I'm just speculating. It's the pattern vendor who couldn't afford to take back the thousands of inventories. But it's also the pattern company who couldn't afford to sell at dirt cheap prices. But also, it's the liquidator who had a deadline here, who needed to empty the stores in May of 2025. So they must have mutually agreed to throw it in the dump. Everybody, I suppose, was guilty of destroying the patterns. It's the higher ups. I can understand why pattern styles come and go. Sewing is a cutthroat business because it's shamelessly in the business of changing our minds. But here's my real issue. I get that all things may eventually make it to the landfill. But throwing something that was never ever used, what a waste! It's appalling. Throwing perfectly new patterns just to profit in the long term. It makes me sick to my stomach thinking of the waste and the huge potential of these patterns to inspire creativity and promote sewing skills. Patterns are very much like books to me. It's considered a resource, a source of knowledge and information. But it's too late now. Many destroyed. Even after explaining the reasons here in this video, it's still unbelievable to me. And I'm still grappling with this information. How could this be? It does not make sense. Thanks for watching.